Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining our unveiling of WealthSign, which is the latest innovation from WealthBlock. For anyone who may not be familiar with WealthBlock, we build capital raising technology that has powered over 130 different investment platforms that have raised close to $2 billion using our solutions that include the most customizable and robust investor onboarding platform, as well as investor reporting tool. So what exactly is WealthSign? Why do you need it? And why do we build it? So WealthSign is the first e-sign solution designed entirely for capital raising. It's an e-sign solution that was built to save you time, grow with your team, and deliver a streamlined subscription automation process. So why WealthSign? Why is this needed, especially in a crowded space for e-sign tools? Well, over the last 3 years, we've had the opportunity to see just how painfully tedious as well as error-prone the process of digitizing a complex subscription document can be. And as a service provider in this space, we ourselves were very often tasked with taking on this challenge for our platform clients. So firsthand internally, we've actually experienced this pain, and we continue to almost on a daily basis when we are setting up subscription documents for clients. And while existing solutions that we integrate with are adequate and they can get the job done, our entire ethos that drives our company is all about asking, how can we make things more efficient, employ more automation, and ultimately save you time so that you can focus on what's most important, which in your case is raising more capital, and in our case is building great capital raising products. So really, we were determined to build the first e-sign solution 100% focused on private capital raising. And as part of this, along this journey, we've also been really inspired by some of the latest innovations in generative AI and have spent a lot of time researching how we can apply large language models to this task. So in the end, we set out to tackle or to attack 4 different areas that you see here in this slide. The first was e-sign setup efficiency. So general purpose e-sign providers were not built 100% focused on addressing the complexity of subscription documents. And when performing this task self-serve, as you have to in a lot of these solutions, we all know it could take hours to configure each document. And then you go back and test, you iterate, maybe there's an issue, and now you're spending several more hours. And when using a service provider that does this for you, we've all heard the timelines where they tell you it could take 2 weeks to complete a document. And the reason is because they have so many to do, but there's not high efficiency in doing so, given the current tools at their disposal. The second area we set out to look into is easy template management. So general purpose solutions were not built with multiple, very unique investor roles in mind, such as investor, individual versus entity investor, or they're not capable of handling dynamic signers, such as in cases where an investor's unique custodian or advisor needs to sign. So you have 100 investors and all of them have the second signer that is different from all for each of them. And they certainly weren't built for repeat signing, meaning they don't have an internal CRM that can save the information and pre-populate it for the next deal. And so with WealthSign, we're able to accomplish all of the above because of the very tight integration between WealthSign and the WealthBlock platform, meaning investors only have to enter in any information once during onboarding, which makes repeat and new investments seamless. And lastly, we asked ourselves, how can we take e-sign to the next level? That's where we started to dive into some AI-driven automation. And honestly, I feel like we've only scratched the surface here, which we'll show you a little bit of that today. But, our entire team, we are just so excited about the evolution of this product and where it will be in even just 3, 6, 9 months from now. So there's a lot of great things we've done so far, but there's a lot more to come. And so we'll show you a little taste of that during the demo. All right, so we are going to take a look under the hood and jump right into a demo. So let me switch over. All right. So this initial screen should look familiar to those of you who have raised capital using the WealthBlock platform before. The first step when building your e-sign using WealthSign is to go ahead and simply give it a name. We then ask you some really simple questions that help us pre-configure your template so that, it gets you, 10 to 15% of the way right off the bat just by answering a few very quick questions, such as, are there any co-subscribers or joint investor fields on your document? For this example, we'll just go ahead and say no. And then we'll simply ask you how many countersigners, so how many members of the issuer or the fund need to sign. We default it to 0 to 3, but as you'll see in the interface, you can add as many as you want. So if there was 15 countersigners, that's possible. And we also I briefly touched on the ability to have dynamic countersigners, where the countersigner is driven dynamically by who's the investor's advisor is, or maybe a representative at the custodian. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. We'll go ahead and upload the document. This field right now, we won't use it, but I did want to touch on this cloning concept. So think of a situation where you've spent hours mapping the document, and then you want to make a copy of this has a small variation. Maybe your lawyer came back to you and said, hey, sorry, we made a mistake. We need to change, one little piece of text. Well, we know obviously that is kind of a hair pulling out experience when you've spent hours and you're like, now I have to remap the whole document. So with our cloning technology, you can take an existing template that you've already mapped, and we'll remap those fields on a new document. So it makes it really easy to handle changes from your lawyers or kind of any back and forth updates that are happening to your subscription document before you're ready to actually distribute those out to investors for signing. So we'll go ahead and just create the template here. So this is completely native interface. So we're not integrating with any, external e-sign providers. This is WealthSign. What we've done here is we've added some helpful controls at the top that get kind of the whole time while you're building, it guides you as to what's going on, what you have left to do. So things like the total fields, unmapped fields over here. Basically, unmapped fields are fields your investors would have to directly enter into your PDF rather than using our smart form technology that's built into WealthSign, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But the holy grail is you give an investor a smart form that has all the conditional logic built in. They answer all the questions there. That's all saved in the CRM so they can use it in later, but then all that information maps to the subscription document, using the WealthSign technology. And hopefully, in an ideal situation, investor reviews their information and simply signs. Lastly, we have a section called requires review. So this is where we start to get into some of the AI automation we've built into WealthSign. We want to make sure that every time we do automate, you're aware of it and you have the opportunity to review. We know with these technologies, they're getting really, really good. We've spent a lot of time layering on top of AI our own algorithms, but we know that's not always going to be 100% accurate. So we're constantly telling you, hey, these are fields that we've auto-mapped for you, auto-populated, but, take the opportunity to review to make it to make sure that everything's correct. So normally when we roll this out, we'll actually start just auto mapping for you, but for the purposes of this demonstration, we wanted to show you in real time, the auto mapping technology. So there's this button over here that you can use to auto map any page that you're on. So I'll go ahead and click it. And you can see right off the bat, it dropped 2 fields. It perfectly placed them on the line. And immediately it says requires review too. So that was what I was mentioning, since we did some automation for you. We want to make sure that you're aware of it. But you can see we were able to immediately determine that this is a date field. So we're looking at the language of the document to say, hey, of all these field types we could select from, what's the best guess for this field based on the information provided? And we were correctly able to determine it was a date field. Additionally, over here, we were able to determine that this is a text field that should map to the user's account name. So this is when we kind of get into our smart form technology. So when you drop any field onto the document here, you can see this nice menu here, and it's organized by their account, user information. Maybe you have custom fields on the actual offer that you want to map, and transaction information, amounts, fees, dates, payment methods, shares, any information. And if you're familiar with WealthBlock's form system, then you know that all of this is also customizable. So if there's other information that you're tracking on a transaction that's very important to you, that can be added to our forms, and then that becomes another field that can be instantly mapped. Now, if you did need to do this on the fly, you're here and you said, hey, I forgot to add a form field, you can click this link and you can see you jump right into our smart form technology, where you can immediately go in and you can see, how you can build and add additional questions, any conditional logic you may need for, such as here, we said, hey, this qualified purchaser section should only show up if you selected yes to the qualified purchaser question. So this is all very important because this allows your subscription document to be dynamic and to only show the fields that are important to investors, that are required by investors based on their previous selections. For instance, if I'm not a qualified investor, there's no reason to show me a bunch of subsequent questions regarding that. This helps reduce errors and make sure the investors are only filling out the information that they need to. And now this saves tons of back and forth. You're not getting subscription documents back that your lawyers or your legal team are saying, hey, they filled this out correctly, we need to go back to them. And we've found that, the amount of back and forth is reduced significantly, and almost in the vast majority of the cases, there is no back and forth at all using this smart form technology integrated with WealthSign. All right, so I'm logged in here. This was Mr. Bill Frillerton, our test investor. And what you can see here as the investor is, it's a little different experience. So before we showed you an experience where you had a direct e-sign to request where they just come in, you fill out the information, but you might want to take a little bit different approach, a more scalable approach, where you're going in and simply sending the investor a direct link and having them actually input the information and go through the signing process for you. So in this case, what we did is we built out this flow here, which we call the investor journey. It allows you to add various steps. So if there was additional things you needed them to do before signing, such as maybe filling out identity information, maybe you needed them to do an accreditation check, maybe you needed them to answer an investor questionnaire that would actually pre-populate additional information into the document, you can do so. It's all configurable. So going through here, I'm going to go through here as the investor, putting in an amount. You can see here, any information I've entered in before is still populated, and makes it really easy for them to get into additional deals. They can answer any questions, such as the accreditation attestation, whether they're a qualified investor. You can see this is our smart form technology. So, if they were to say yes, they would get additional questions. If they were to say no, the questions go away. I'm going to leave it as no, so you can see how that dynamically affects the WealthSign document. And then if you want to do any accreditation, as part of the broader WealthBlock tool, there's the ability to do accreditation, and actually we have providers that will run through the checks, request documents, and everything. And lastly, we get to the e-sign step. So you can see here, this document we just built with WealthSign. You can see, this was a date field, and we didn't even have to change it because we auto-detected it. We have our name automatically populated. If we come here, you can see we checked this box in accreditation, so that was automatically populated. And you can see the qualified purchaser section. If you remember, we put check boxes here, but they're nowhere to be found now. And that's because we gated this to a question, to a list. So basically we said, hey, if you answer that you're not a qualified investor, basically just on that yes or no, there's no reason to confuse you by adding additional to here. So they automatically disappeared. It eliminates any error, eliminates an investor coming in here and checking a box because they don't understand what this means. And then you later saying, hey, you told us you weren't qualified, but you checked the box and you correct this, and going back and forth. And lastly, on the signature page, you can see all of it populated. And again, this was all auto-populated. I'm an individual, so the entity boxes don't even show up. Of course, I am not the countersigner, so those don't show up as well. Populated the amount and all of these fields, again, which were auto-detected, so we didn't even have to do the mapping. So go ahead and just put in any signature here, and we're done. And since this is part of this, WealthBlock investor journey that we've integrated WealthSign in, you can see that you could have them proceed on to additional steps if you wanted, such as potentially a wire or sending a check, or other various payment options we have. We integrate with credit card. We even have some integrations with IRA providers, and they can go ahead and confirm their investment. So I'm going to hop back in to the admin side of this experience so you can see the kind of after effects of what just happened here. Go back over. All right. One quick thing before we get into what happened with that e-sign, because we did skip over this before, was the management section of this investor flow. So if you go this route where you want to embed WealthSign into the investor flow, I just wanted to touch really quickly what that looks like underneath the hood. So if you look in here, if you were configuring your deal, you can see these were the steps that we had the investor go through. This is all entirely configurable. You can see we have all sorts of steps. If you needed income verification steps, if you wanted to put a manual approval, meaning that you could stop the investor at any point in this flow. So one thing you could do, really good strategy to help, prevent potential, incorrect information being mapped to the e-sign is you go ahead and do something such as stick a manual approval step right before the e-sign. So what that would do, it would stop the investor in their tracks right here. And so they would see whatever custom message you want here. And before that, they'd fill out any information, and that would give you an opportunity to actually review the information before it even gets mapped to the e-sign. So now you could say, hey, the phone number wasn't correct, or whatever it is, or you selected a specific country and we're not accepting international investors right now, whatever it be. So that prevents the e-sign from even getting to you. It gives you a chance to review their information before that auto mapping happens, which is very powerful. So there's a host of different steps you can add into your investor flow. And that's why we think this flow is pretty powerful because of all the additional things you can ask them. This flow also allows you to, so in the manual, let's send out e-sign to them. Remember, you're sending out one e-sign at a time, but in this case, you could add an additional e-sign document. So if you wanted to add, maybe there's a W-9 document, maybe you don't have a combiner subscription document, you wanted to go ahead and add a W-9 for the investor to fill out, you could do so. So they could, maybe come through and, go through this. So we call this template WealthSign Demo that we did, and then maybe they do a W-9. So it also allows you to layer e-signs. And again, if you just wanted them to still just pretty much do an e-sign because you've already populated their information, you go ahead and delete all of these steps. Simply drop your investor into this view. Maybe you don't even want to think about payment right now, and you can have them just e-sign a series of documents back to back to back. So it allows you to build out a customizable journey of e-sign documents as well. One last thing is that I wanted to touch on is when you're out adding these e-signs, just like within the e-sign document where you have the ability to say, these fields are for these users and these fields are for other types of investor roles, you can do that at the document level. So that same menu you saw where you had, individuals or entities or different lists, you could do that. So, because there might be cases where you have an entire template that only should be even seen or signed at all by a specific group of investors. And so, like a W-8 versus W-9, for international and versus domestic and investors, you could have all those e-sign steps in here and then segment those out based on various roles. And when they go through the journey, they're only going to see the e-sign steps that are applicable to them. When you're setting the countersigner here, we touched on this, and this is pretty powerful, is the concept of a dynamic countersigner. So in this case, on the issuer account, there's a couple admins here I could select as the countersigner, but I could also select a form field. So in my smart forms, I had a field for the custodian representative for each investor. So let's say they custody with Schwab, or they custody with Millennium, and let's say there's a someone at that firm who actually also has to sign the document. And you don't know, you might not know ahead of time who the investor custodies with, or more commonly, you got 100 investors and 30 of them custody here, 30 of them custody here. And now you can have that be dynamic, where if you have that representative on each of their profiles, now we know, hey, for investor A, send the next signature request to this person. For investor B, send the signature to somebody else. So that's a very powerful dynamic concept there. So that's all I want to touch on kind of the management of the journey. We saw the investor go through it, and wanted to kind of circle back and show you how easy it is to actually build this out, how you can, chain multiple wealth signs together, or layer wealth signs with other steps such as completing forms or approval steps that give you a chance to review all of the investors' information before they actually sign. And lastly, as an admin, let's say you took them through that journey, you'd be able to see this in the transaction management screen. So I can see this was the investor that went through the deal. the amount, the time it happened. If I wanted to run KYC on them, I could do that immediately. But then I could also see here the status of their e-sign. So I can see Bill Fullerton signed, but we're waiting for a SIPC counter. So that's pretty much it. And so, kind of recap, we went through building an e-sign document in WealthSign and showed you the tremendous efficiency gains that you achieve by using this tool in terms of the auto placement of fields. If you ask anyone on our internal team who's had to do 40, 50-page documents for clients, just dragging the fields over and dragging 100 fields over is painful task in itself. So, even being able to just place them in the right place is a huge time saver. Second, being able to auto map them for you. And as we said, we're just scratching the surface of auto mapping, but you see that we've gotten, a lot of the, the common fields like name, title, phone number, but we're going to dig deeper and start doing some of the custom questionnaire answers, the check boxes and things like that, all in the efforts to save you time and improve the accuracy of the mapping on your document. We then went and talked about, the two ways that you could distribute the documents. You could do it manually, where you simply just enter the information for the user and just say, hey, just do an e-sign, just like you would do with, the various standalone tools out there. Or you can combine the documents, the WealthSign subscription documents within a journey, an investor journey, where you get to dictate the flow and dictate when they have to stop and pause for you to review, when they have to give you more information.